Hello everyone. We are on the graveyard shift, aren't we? Who of you are feeling tired? Okay. Because this is the reality. This is pure neuroscience working at its best. Sensory input is accumulative. So as we proceed throughout the day, our brains get a little bit more tired and a little bit more tired. And then we start to not really listen that well anymore. So I'm going to do my best in 15 minutes time to get you to listen. Juhi, thank you for sharing your story. And there were so many other stories here today, which was so enlightening to listen to. So I feel very welcome and part of a collective group, and we seem to speak the right language or the same language. Whether we've got the decision makers here that's going to implement what we take from today, that's always the $1 million question. Hopefully I'm going to use this thing correctly. Okay. So sensory intelligence is really about looking at how we are unique and very different as individuals on a very invisible level. I'm going to share a little bit with you. This is pure neuroscience. The brain processes 11 million bits of sensory information from your 7 senses. Yes, you've got 7, not just 5. Every second. 90% of that comes from the space that you occupy. So obviously, as I came into this room today, and even more so having sit at the back just now, there's some real funny background noises, the light are happening all around us, the space not that flowing. I was sitting here and was wondering what was going on this side. So I always look at an environment through a lens from a sensory level. What does it mean for us as end users? Because we all respond differently. Which is why I want to ask you, have you noticed the lights, the sounds, the space, the noise? And you will probably, if we go into detail here, you will all find that you've listened to things a little bit differently, you've heard something a little bit different, you might have smelled something that someone else haven't, the light might have bothered you. So I know some of you commented on that. We all are totally differently wired. And we respond to our environments based on our genetic sensory thresholds, which is part of our wiring. We are born like this. And who of you can feel the sock inside your shoe? I always ask that, and there's always someone who says, yes, I can. Who's that person in the room today? Maybe you aren't, maybe. Oh, are there someone? Okay, there's always someone who feels their sock inside their shoe. There's more people there. So if you feel the sock inside your shoe every day, that should be irrelevant information. So your brain is taking a lot more energy and space to absorb that, which means there's a lot more capacity that's being occupied in your sensory space, and it doesn't release your energy so that you can think and plan. So if some of you don't always get what I try to present with you in 15 minutes, it's okay, because I know your brain might be unintentively or wanted be spending time and effort on information and stimuli that's not really relevant or important at this stage. And then sensory diversity shapes how we experience work. Yes, it's largely invisible. We're not really aware of that, which is really the premise of what I want to share with you. Hello? It doesn't want to move on. Am I too fast, too slow? I can't do buttons. Okay, that must be it. Okay, so often typical inclusion is what we see. And if we talk about disability, it's often what is visible. But what I want to actually get to is sensory diversity is really how we feel. What does the space actually do to our brains individually, and how does that result in our thinking and our doing? So sensory processing, how do we receive, filter and respond to our world? And this happens, and I can't take you through all the neuroscience, very much unconsciously. It's not something that we consciously respond to, it's unconscious. But this happens constantly throughout the day. It even happens at night while you are sleeping, just in a different format. But it is very different for all of us, and each and every one of us have a threshold type. Have you got low thresholds? Have you got medium thresholds? And have you got high thresholds? you definitely have low thresholds. So hopefully it's okay that I use you as an example, because I was fascinated by your case study or what you've shared. For instance, I've got high thresholds, so I have a bangle, and I realized I should possibly take it off because I don't know if it's going to bother some of you. I have a bangle which tingles and makes noise because my profile type, having high thresholds, and I work from home every day, it's super boring. I hate it. So my bangle literally is a little bit of background noise, and it keeps my brain going. It's a strategy that I apply to keep my brain in an optimum focus level. So I'm polar opposite to Yui, which is just interesting to see. But all of us have got these threshold types, and intuitively we respond to our environment, and we act or we think or we do really as a product of how our brains process the environment on this primitive level. And it does impact our stress, our communication, our well-being, and our focus. How do we communicate? How do we get throughout our day? It really has a fundamental impact of what we do on a day-to-day basis. And then here's the thing, workplaces are typically built, designed, and managed as a one-size-fits-all approach. I do not know why the world can't get this right. We're not a one-size-fits-all. Regardless of whether we are on a disability element, we might be neurodiverse, there might be a mental health issue that we have, or whether we are totally supreme and highly intelligent and maybe on the other end, doesn't really matter. We all respond to the world differently, and if we can make this match, we're going to just get people to be more calm, more focused, more into what they're busy doing. They're going to work better, they're going to be happier. Everyone wins. I don't get that it's so hard to implement this. So I thought, let me share a little bit of our research. I don't know, I can't seem to get away from research, but data is quite interesting stuff to work with. We do sensory assessments. It's a large part of the business that I run. And I've designed actually assessments post my PhD because I was so frustrated with the instruments at the time that I had to use. And for instance, we looked at 4,523 data sets. And 40% in that data sets of people have got low thresholds, meaning they are more sensitive to their environment, they are more impacted by noise, light, smell, sounds, movement, what goes on, versus 22% has got high threshold, is on the opposite end, okay? So that was the full sample that we work with. But then what we then did do, we unpacked that sample in what were neurotypically healthy adults, and then a large group of that sample was people with neurodiversity, and it was also a blend of mental health, people that were seen for mental health issues. And 40% of that group actually had low thresholds, meaning they are a lot more sensory sensitive, and they need more accommodations within their day-to-day environments to be able to produce best quality of work. Because this is just wiring. It doesn't mean, it's not to say that this is an indication whether you can do the job or not. That's got nothing to do with it. So I just think it's very interesting if we consider in this particular space, we need to allow for that 47% of people who need more reasonable accommodations within their environments. And it's not so hard. It's fairly easy to implement that, and it's often zero cost. It is often zero cost. It could be as simple as change the positioning of your screen, use a different light, put a pot plant on, change the background of your screen color, your icons. There are a million little bit of information or accommodations that one can bring into a workspace to just make people's brains function more or function easier, be more less distracted. And then it was just interesting, the healthy sample has a really nice bell curve. 40% of people are really neurotypical, and low thresholds 30%, and then high threshold the other 30%. But again, sensory overload is very prevalent within our neurodiversity and our people with extra from that point of view. Why does this matter for organizations? Because systems design are usually mostly around for one sensory type, and it creates exclusion for someone else. The world has been designed for people who's got high thresholds, because it's busy, it's noisy, it's crazy. We are bombarded with information all the time. I loved when it was COVID. I think COVID was payback time for people who's got low thresholds, because the world got a pause button, everything slowed down, everything was quiet, and those people thrived. We loved it. I didn't like it. I hated it. But I could see how many of our clients were like absolutely in the best space ever, because they could work from home. The world literally had shut down. And low threshold people in that stage flourished. They absolutely flourished. I still have clients who say, can't we go back to lockdown? Because that was such a great time for them, because the environment was so much more conducive for what their brains needed. So open plan offices, it is dreadful. It's noisy, fast-paced, it's overloaded for low threshold individuals. Hence the flexibility of home working or hybrid working. We are 100% supportive of that. That makes, we move away from a one-size-fits-all approach, and we actually regard the fact that if we can do accommodations for people, they can actually work better. There's continuous digital demands. We are overwhelmed with digital bombardment of information, and this is particularly true for people with sensory sensitivity. For instance, I've revamped a course on digital fatigue, because we are absolutely digitally fatigued, particularly for our neurodiverse group of people. Communication styles and workflow often also is designed to favor high threshold profiles. And then there's sensory misalignment. And if there's sensory misalignment, there's reduced performance, there's disengagement, and there's burnout. It is as simple as that. The research, and I can't take you through all of that detail, is very, very clear. People who have low thresholds and are more sensory sensitive are more prone to burnout, more prone to anxiety, more prone to pain disorders, more prone to depression. Those type of mental health illnesses are largely very prevalent in this particular group. And so in the autism spectrum space, very much really bothered by sensory stimulation, and we also see that within the ADHD space. So the framework that we use is a neuroscience-based approach. We usually do three things. Firstly is do a sensory audit. How inclusive is that workspace? But then there's also what I call sensory informed design, so at least consider the sensory elements of a space. And then you have sensory inclusive design. Do you have a focus area for someone who needs more quiet space? So it's a different level to it. Sensory informed design is the basic. Let's just look at why are spaces there and workspaces there. They are there to create a function or to facilitate a function for people. And then the next level is sensory inclusive design. So we've got assessments that we work, and then we further follow that up with employee development, coaching, training, workshops, because empowering people, regardless of where they are, is actually a brilliant way to solve a lot of these problems. Knowing that in itself is already part of the solution. So sensory smart organizations do three things. They first recognize the hidden sensory barriers. There are noise, clutter, pace, lighting, interruptions in workspaces that are often not really conducive for any human being, even more so for people with disability or neurodiversity. Then we design sensory aligned systems, whether it be workplace design or zoning, communication norms, flexibility, environmental choices. The list is really, really endless. And then they support neurodiverse and neurotypical employees, both of them, because if we can put it all together and we look at all of this, because that I think will also help, that we don't just focus on the neurodiverse group or people with disability, that we bring everyone in that communication. I'm talking on a team level, because then we actually get rid of so many of those barriers and that stigma. So personal strategies, team understanding, system level adjustments. I've had phenomenal insight with just team understanding. If teams can understand themselves and each other, it makes a big difference. I am out of time, but I'm nearly done. Let me just double check. So just the impact: reduce burnout and overwhelm, performance, focus, stronger belonging, psychological safety, better retention, employee experience. Leaders gain a new lens for invisible diversity, which is obviously quite basic. So there's just some information. If you wanted to contact us, that is what we work on. We do have a free sensory quiz if you want to determine whether you've got low, medium, or high thresholds. It's quite fun to work with. And then we must not only learn to tolerate our differences, we must welcome them as the richness and diversity which can lead to true intelligence. So thank you, that's it.